listening to the Bluejay Breakdown.
Welcome into the Bluejay Breakdown. Anna Bellinghausen and Drake Keeler alongside with you. We're talking Creighton women's basketball. Drake, they came off a 75-52 win at NDSU, in Sioux Falls for a little neutral site game. You got to watch most of that game. What did you take away most?
Yeah, they took care of business. They did what you want to see from a team that made the tournament last year. They were really strong defensively, held North Dakota State to like 32% shooting, forced a bunch of turnovers, even, had an off night from Morgan Molly shooting the ball, but they took care of business. They still won by a lot. So it was a good opening game at a neutral site. Yeah, I mean, that's about all there is to say. They took care of business.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if one player is having an off night, it doesn't really matter because the other three in that core four are going to step up. Lauren Jensen led the way with 23 points and only 2 turnovers, which I think is great to see how she's taking care of the ball as well. What did you like from that core four group of play, even if Molly was maybe having an off shooting night?
Yeah. Lauren Jensen, 23 points, played really well, scored the ball really well. And they all played, good defense. I think all of them except Lauren Jensen had multiple steals. And that core, again, is going to be strong. Mallory Brake, we'll talk about her stepping in the starting lineup, really making some defensive plays. So that was encouraging to see.
Yeah, you mentioned the steals. Emma Ronstick with 4, Morgan Molly with 2, Molly Mogensen with 3, and then aforementioned Mallory Brake with 3. She's gotten to step up into that role this year as the other starter. That was kind of the question, right? You had your core 4. Jim Flannery talked about it. Of course, we love to see those 4 coming back, but it's who's going to step into that other spot in the starting 5 to round it off. What did you like for Mallory Brake?
Yeah, I mean, I think after the exhibition, Jim Flannery talked about, her length and her what she brings on the defensive end, and that's what she showed in this game. Obviously, not someone that might, put up a bunch of points each night, but she's making defensive plays. She's important on that end and really just, kind of pulls together that starting lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. And seeing also some youngsters get in, Kennedy Townshed as well with 8 points. Nice to see her get some playing time. Even the freshman, Michaela Miller, 6 points for her. Kiana Lockett, 4. And then tough to talk about, but Lexi Unruh, she's been hurt her entire Creighton career, and it looked like it was the same knee that she injured. So hopefully a recovery that can get her back into the season at some point. But from the bench players, who stood out?
Yeah, I think you kind of covered it. Kennedy Townsend, obviously you hope that Lexi is okay, that it's not a long-term injury. Coach, again, I'm going back to Coach Flannery's press conference after the exhibition. He said he felt like this could be a really deep team if, the bench kind of consistently steps up. They did that pretty decently in this game. Obviously, you're going to need, the bench to be available, so you hope that they stay healthy, but yeah, they played a pretty good game, and Townsend had 3 steals.
Yep. Yeah, really impressive on the defensive end. And I think that's always something that Creighton gets knocked on a little bit, right? They know the offense is always there, but it's what's your defensive identity. What did you like from that defense especially?
Yeah, they played well. They were just really solid inside. North Dakota State was having a tough time getting open shots. And obviously really active defensively. You see the steals, you see the turnovers, 17 steals, 26 turnovers forced. That's always a pretty good numbers to see.
Yeah. Well, Coach Flan is always known for putting together a pretty tough non-conference schedule. So they play South Dakota at home on Friday at 11:30 a.m. Then they play Green Bay, which is another pretty good basketball program to put in your non-conference schedule. And then, of course, at Nebraska, Georgia Tech, Michigan State. I mean, the list goes on when you look further down, Wyoming, Northern Illinois. You don't quite have the Stanford that you had to play last year, but there's still a high caliber of non-conference play. What do you think Creighton needs to get out of this non-con slate to head into Big East play, which we know is super competitive?
Yeah, I mean, you want to see them continue play like they did on Monday. Obviously, they won't win every game in non-con by 20 points. That Nebraska game on the road is going to be a big one. They blew them out last year. If they can win that game again and be a quality win, they've got a lot of just solid teams. Maybe like you mentioned, not like the top end teams
not
on that
playing
schedule,
top 10
but,
teams.
There's not really like a much of a letdown as you go through that non-con. So that's really impressive, and I'm really interested to watch how they go through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the leadership, I think you'll see that grow throughout the season too. I mean, when you look at that core 4 again, keep bringing them up, but they've had another year under their belt in another NCAA tournament, which of course was the complete opposite of that Elite Eight run, right? So you get out that first round, and I talked to Lauren Jensen about it and just kind of that motivation that comes from that. And she said, yeah, it does fuel us. We do think about that a lot because, that team was better than that performance. And a lot of March Madness is, of course, based upon matchups. But how do you think that experience can translate throughout the season? And the expectations have to be high, right? Because you returned, I think it was 84% of your scoring. How do you think they can translate that throughout the rest of the season, then come postseason?
Yeah, the expectations are high, and they've got a good, solid schedule where you can't rest on a given night.
Right.
Where every team's gonna be able to challenge you if you aren't careful. And I'm really excited to watch them as the season goes on with that experience. You know what you're gonna get from them. They do what they do, and they do it well. So they've really built that up strong.
Biggest hurdle this year is going to be UConn, and I read something today that apparently Paige Beckers is playing at her even better performance level than she was during her, Player of the Year performance. So really interesting quote. I think Gino said that, just the level of Paige Beckers, but that's the kind of level that Creighton wants to get to of their excellence, and how can they beat a UConn team, right? They almost did last year too, I think, on the road. But what kind of hurdles do you think Creighton needs to get over to get to that conversation of, hey, we're a UConn in this league?
Yeah, I think what they kind of want to do is just kind of hone in on what they do well. Obviously, they're not they know what they have in the roster. You can tell that when you hear Jim Flannery talk about his team. Talk about some of the defensive shortcomings they might have, the size, things like that. So they know what they do. They do it well, and against a team like UConn, that's going to be at least top 5 team in the country pretty much all season. You really hope that can, I don't know, get you over the hump. One of those 2 matchups they have this year.
Right. Yeah. Every team can't be UConn. You got to play to your advantage, especially in women's basketball. Well, upcoming, you got South Dakota next at home. So that's the home opener. And then Green Bay, like I mentioned, then at Nebraska. Drake, we'll be there both covering it. Can't wait to see how these Blue Jays do this season. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sweet. And then we'll do Creighton men. Okay. 3, 2, 1. National Signing Day as well for Creighton women's basketball. Big day, of course, across the nation. Drake, who stood out to you of the signees for the Blue Jays?
Yeah, I mean, well, they signed 2 players, Elizabeth Gentry and Allison Heathcock, to a center and a guard, Gentry respectively, of course. Add some, more 6-footers to the class, accomplished high school players that, they really feel can fit the system well.
Yeah, Jim Flannery it's funny because he hasn't really had much turnover in his program. I mean, there's been, I think, 1 player to transfer out throughout his tenure. So when you sign those players, you're basically signing them for all those 4 years, and really you can see the development throughout the program too. And excited to see both of those get in. And signing day is always exciting for sure. And on the women's side, especially because they only have 1 freshman this year with Michaela. So it'll be interesting to see how they get worked in. And of course, there's going to be shoes to fill for sure in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like, for Allison Heathcock, one of the best players in Oklahoma, which has a pretty talented, class these next few years. Nebraska's got a player coming in 2025 from that state. So you really, as she's a guard, you hope that she can contribute in the coming years.
Absolutely. Thank you, Drake.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
A Hurrdat Sports Network production.